So you went, but you eventually found your way down to
Well,
the
then I
coast.
quit teaching.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and
And you
after
quit teaching, you were able to sell pottery. And
I thought I could make a living doing it.
okay.
I was pretty sure, and no reason that I should have been, other than I figured, well, I could go to craft sales and I could probably make $15,000 a year, and that we could live. My second wife and I and her son could live on $15,000 a year in this cheap house we bought. We probably could have, but it took me a year to get the house livable, and I still didn't have a studio. Fortunately, 40 acres came with it, so I sold off 10 acres for $10,000, and my wife got a job the very next day, and so I got a studio built and went at it. And then and opened my first gallery here in town. I had it open for business out at my place out in Bokebeek on Canada Day of '83, and then the next winter saw a building for rent downtown here for only $250 a month. I was afraid to even check out the price because in Fredericton, a space of that size, even then, would have cost me $700 a month probably. And I got down there and I thought, well, this, but a lot of shops were closed. A lot of vacant shops in St. Andrews then. And the winter of '84, I was downtown and saw this shop, and it was for rent $250 a month, all inclusive, heat, electricity, year round. And, well, that's pretty good. Started going to the big one-of-a-kind show, it's called, in Toronto, big national craft show. But I continued to do that for 10 years. And that big reason for doing that was to get my reputation out of the Maritimes, farther west. There were a handful of people. I had been nominated for a national prize a couple of times, so there were some people in the know who knew me, but and so the main reason I went there really was to get my reputation out of the Maritimes, and it did.
And you've since exhibited internationally.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it really worked.
Oh yes, it really did. And I went up there that first year, and I went and I decided I was going to interview the galleries. It was a heyday in the mid '80s, and so I had my portfolio with me, and I went around one day early in the morning and went to all these different galleries that people had told me about. I went to 4 of them, I guess, and I came away unsure of any of them at that point. And I had been to the last one that I had planned to, and I was walking down the street, still not deciding what I was going to do, and I passed this shop window with, it was primarily an antique store, but he had some gorgeous pottery in the window. And so I went in the window, or in the shop, and I found a lot of ceramics there. And the owner of it he was dealing in mostly European antiques, but his personal love was contemporary ceramic, and had been since he was a kid, and he was showing contemporary ceramics. And I had a book with me that I had just gotten from the Gardner Museum in Toronto, of an exhibition that they were having of quite a few years dead, Hans Koper, English, German-born, but English potter, Hans Koper, and they were having a great, huge retrospective exhibition of his work. And one of the 2 guys that owned the place said, "Oh, I see you've been up to the Gardner. Did you see that Hans Koper show?" I said, "Yes, I'd seen that back in the spring when I had been up earlier, or in the fall. But I went and I bought the book of the show, the catalog of the show." And Hans Koper had been quite a favorite of mine when I was a student at Alfred, and had a great influence on my work. And he said, yeah. And then I said, yeah, I'm a potter. And he said, you have anything with you? I said, yeah, here. So I had my portfolio. And he said, and I told him what I was doing. I was out the one-of-a-kind show, and they said, well, we'll be down. And they came down and bought a bunch of stuff, and then they came down the last day of it. They bought everything that I hadn't sold, which wasn't a lot, but another 5 or 6 pieces. Mm-hmm. And they did that for 5 years. And I had also had 3 one-man shows with them in those 5 years. And then they went bankrupt in the depression, or the recession of the early 90s. Mm-hmm. They lost their brand new house they had built out in this wonderful area, and first they lost their car, and then they lost their house, and then they lost the business, and then they moved to Calgary. And yeah, and I had my first one-man show there in '89, spring of '89. Drew so many people on opening day. I sold all but 2 pieces of ceramics and all but 2 collages. I had 12 collages there as well. Mm-hmm. And I sold $22,000 worth of work in 6 hours on that Saturday afternoon. And 200 and some people came through. And the gallery community in the area of Toronto were just agog. They had never heard of an exhibit with that many people out on an opening day. And these guys hired a Japanese restaurant to make the snacks and things. So there were trays, like 18-inch diameter trays of sushi of all kinds. No, I could have gone to heaven. And so that had 2 more with them.
And when did you receive the
1999, that.
1999, and you, what is that?
It's called the Royal Canadian Academy of the Arts, okay. But they just say RCA. And so, I don't know, they take in anywhere from 20 to 30 or 40 a year out of all of the arts. Mm-hmm.
But it puts you in quite esteemed company, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Oh yeah, there's no question.
Other writers and
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so you're
theater people and and musicians and visual artists, architects.
How do you do your work? What do you do first? And this is a very kind of concrete question. What do you do first? What do you do second? What do you do third? That sort of thing.
Well, I mean, it's after making pottery for so long a period of time. The physical process is simply getting your clay and getting it ready to work, and 90% of my work is on the wheel, on the potter's wheel. And so now, again, since I've been doing it so long, ideas come, and I keep getting new ideas. A lot of things affect and over the years have affected what I have made. And I say to people, each time I make something will happen during that making of that. I don't intentionally set out to make one piece. I usually intend to make a group of related pieces. So if it's little things like little T-balls, I might make 50 or 100 of them. If it's larger pieces, I'll usually work in groups of 4 to 6 of all related pieces, some variations on an idea. I love swelling, voluptuous forms as far as working on a potter's wheel, and what happens, that enclosing of air and all that space. People ask them, what do you keep in that? Well, it's air. That's for air. I got so attracted to the malleability and the potential of clay when I first when I took that first course in 1956.
Sure.
And I'm still intrigued by that. And in my early years, my work was, well, I was a student anyhow, and I was strongly influenced by the abstract expressionist work of Peter Voulkos and some other potters, and I didn't care whether it worked or not. But even in my early work in graduate school, we were required to make a lot of functional pieces, but I made a lot of pieces that were banged up quite a bit. Rip and tear school of pottery, and jab a stick in it, and I continue to do. You see a hint of that in some of the things. I tear the rims of these big fat forms frequently to give them a more dynamic appearance, or an entirely different thing. You just break that rim and it's an entirely different object. And I view most of my pottery as forms.